was a big one, wasn't it? This was a big decision, an amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system. This was a colossal abuse of power which never occurred in American history prior to recent decades. And we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century, me. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people.
President Trump just addressed a monumental Supreme Court decision poised to redefine executive power in this country. He personally thanked the justices who ruled in his favor. The 6-3 decision sending shockwaves across the country as it limits lower courts' ability to block president's executive orders by using a nationwide injunction. This case specifically revolved around whether President Trump could enforce his ban on birthright citizenship. And the decision now clears a path for him to move forward with that, at least for now, even though the vast majority of constitutional scholars say it is unconstitutional. CNN's Kristen Holmes is at the White House. Kristen, you're listening to the president there, clearly taking a victory lap, not just on the Supreme Court decision, given he has so many executive orders that had currently been blocked by injunctions such as this, but Iran, his big, beautiful bill, you name it.
Right, everything. I do want to point to a couple of things because I think the most notable came in the form of him listing off the executive orders that have been stopped by a nationwide injunction. He said, thanks to this decision, we can now probably file to proceed with these numerous policies for those who have been wrongly, he says wrongly, enjoyed on a nationwide basis. He includes birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee settlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgery, and a number of other priorities. He said he had a whole list there. This is really the crucial part of this ruling. It does expand the executive, and it expands the executive under President Trump. They believe that now they have more of an opportunity to move forward with executive orders without the threat of having them stopped or paused by a lower court ruling. This limit of power is not going to just apply, as he said, to birthright citizenship, but to a much larger selection of issues that President Trump is going to try to push through using these executive orders, particularly now that this ruling has come down in the Supreme Court. Now, the other part of this that I thought was fascinating, you mentioned briefly, was him thanking the Supreme Court justices over and over again and thanking them by name. I'll just remind you, a couple months ago, we reported that President Trump had been critical privately about his Supreme Court justice that he appointed, Amy Coney Barrett. Here, he said that she was brilliant, that her writing was brilliant on this ruling when she was asked about it. Clearly, he is very happy with the ruling here, but we don't generally hear presidents coming out and thanking the Supreme Court for their decisions, and that was probably another really notable moment here.
Listen, Ed, brilliant when they agree with him. We've seen this pattern. Kristen Holmes at the White House, thanks so much. I'm joined now by a terrific group of reporters and analysts. CNN's Joan Biskupic, Jeff Mason of Reuters, Sungmin Kim of the AP, and CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. I want to begin with you, and I have a lot to get through with our constitutional experts here. But on the birthright citizenship piece of this, does this effectively allow him now to block birthright citizenship, which, as we said, constitutional scholars say the language is quite clear on in some parts of the country, at least for a period of time?
In theory only, because first of all, this whole thing's on hold for at least 30 days. That was already written into the executive order, and essentially the court reminded people of that. Right now, as we speak, Jim, people are going to lower courts right now, trying to use alternative methods, trying to look for class action ability to sort of block it. But what the court has given him, two major things here. First, at least an invitation to try to end birthright citizenship. And the other, as Kristen just mentioned, an invitation for a whole swath of policies that are arguably unlawful. I was in the courtroom when Justice Barrett read this. And first of all, I just have to say, it was a very big surprise that she authored this, only because the whole world up there works on seniority, and Chief Justice John Roberts had the authority to decide who would write this. And look who he gave it to, the most junior member of that six-justice majority. Gave it to her, first of all, in part because she does tend to be, compared to her colleagues, not compared to the left for sure, a little more measured. And in fact, several of the other conservatives split off and wanted it to go further. But the point is that she got to do this, and it's going to give a green light to countless presidential orders that right now had been stopped. No question.
I want to get to that list of orders, but before we do, Elie Honig, what do those who want to challenge this ruling, who want to protect birthright citizenship, what do plaintiffs do now to attempt to defend that in light of this decision?
Well, they have to either become parties themselves to a lawsuit, right? They can no longer rely on, well, one district judge in some other district blocked this nationwide. If someone wants to challenge this now, they have to either sue on their own or become part of what we call a class action, a large group of people going in and suing at once. It's way more burdensome than it was a few hours ago. And the bottom line takeaway from today is right now, the presidency, forget about Donald Trump, the presidency is far more powerful than it was at 9:55 a.m. this morning. What this says is that district court judges, by and large, cannot individually block a president's orders across the country. And it should be noted, this was a problem. This was a practice that bothered and upset and got in the way of presidential initiatives of Joe Biden, of Barack Obama, of George W. Bush to an extent. But this has now fundamentally shifted the balance of powers away from the courts to the president. And I should say, with the press conference that just adjourned, the president is correct that he got a big win today. But there was some overstatement in there, too. At one point, I think the attorney general said, now district court judges can't stop us from doing anything. Yes, they can. They can on a case-by-case, party-by-party basis. But their power to do that's much reduced.
Listen, there are people watching this decision today whose children were born in this country, and the law as understood, and not just at the 14th Amendment, but for instance the 1898 decision, Wong Kim Ark, where the expectation was your child's born here, they're a citizen. They have questions now, and they have questions about how they pursue that case if it's taken away from them.